Welcome back to In Frame Brooklyn. Charlie from Real Brooklyn Films here, and today we're going to continue our series of looking at and going in depth in the chapters of my book, Documentary Filmmaking 101. And I hope you enjoyed last week's talking about interviews, because we know interviews are very important. They're one of the most important things in making a documentary film, and hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully you learned some things you hadn't heard before, things that people don't talk about. So hopefully that was good. Today we're going to take a few steps backwards, and we're going to go to Chapter 4. For those of you who are already reading the book, Chapter 4 is pre-production. Pre-production. Actually says it in the book. Pre-production. So let's get into it. Pre-production. You can't say it enough. The reason is because good pre-production is the difference between having an actual movie and failing. Honestly, any filmmaker will tell you that the pre-production period is the most important part of making a movie, because without that, your chances of making a successful film are tiny. So you've done your development, you've reached out to your potential interviewers, interviewees. You're the interviewer. Interviewees. You've got their time frame. You got their schedules. You know when they're available, and you're now ready to shoot. No, you're not. Pre-production is the crux of getting a film made. And what is pre-production? Well, it's made up of two segments: schedule and budget. You can't have a budget without a schedule, because there are things that are going to happen in your schedule that are definitely going to relate to your budget. So the first thing we need to talk about is schedule. Here we go. Welcome to scheduling your documentary.
And there was much rejoicing.
And the reason why scheduling your documentary is so important is because how you schedule your documentary literally will affect the efficiency of how you get things done. Scheduling a documentary film is very different than scheduling a narrative film. And for the purposes of my videos, when I say documentary film, I mean a documentary feature as opposed to a narrative film. That is not, obviously, it's like a regular movie. For a narrative, you have a first AD who will break down the script and schedule all of those scenes within a particular time. And it's not simple, but it's done. With a documentary film, you have a lot of factors. You have your interviewees with their own schedules. You have location restrictions. Where can you shoot? How many times can you go back to a place? Your time frame. If your movie's time sensitive, like with Rising Tides, it was time sensitive, and then I wanted to get it out before the election. Time sensitive doesn't mean you're trying to get it done in time for a film festival. That's irrelevant. But if it's not time sensitive, then you have the flexibility of getting your people when you can get them. Now, to start with making a schedule, you have to think about clumping your interviews. Yes, clumping is a good word. So to save money, if you've got interviewees in a particular place, like when I was shooting down in Annapolis, I had like 5 different interviews plus interviews down in DC. So I scheduled that all for 1 week. So I banged out all of that stuff in one place, so I didn't have to go back to Annapolis. Actually, I wound up having to go back, but that's another story. So you want to clump your interviews to save money. Now, if you're shooting your documentary where you live and everything is, close, then it's not a problem. For me, I have 2 rules. That if my interviewer, let's say subject, forget about interviewing, let's say subject, it's easier to remember. If my subject is within a 2-hour drive of Brooklyn, then I'll drive. It'll be a 1-day trip. I'll go out and do the interview, and I'll come back. If it's 3 hours or more, and I can't drive, always drive. We'll get into that for a second. If it's 3 hours or more, then that is a hotel day. In which case, I will try to schedule as many interviews as I can for that day or 2 days, if it winds up being 2 hotel days. But get it done, and then don't waste time. Come back home. The reason for that is every day you're on the road is hotel and food, and that stuff adds up. And we'll get into, when we talk about the budget, we'll talk about that. However, it's important to minimize your time on the road because you've got a very small budget. In the book, I talk about a $5,000 budget, which I think is a reasonable amount for your first documentary. So in that $5,000, you have to squeeze a number of things. Again, we'll talk about it in the budget, but you want to be conscious when you're making your schedule to really preserve that money for when you need it. Avoid flying. Flying eats up your budget. Flight, there's gear, rental cars. Avoid it if you can, because quite frankly, it's a budget killer. I had to fly twice on Rising Tides, and it's just it's not money well spent. Be conscious of where you're going, how much you can get done, and literally space saving with regards to being very, very, very careful of how much time you're giving to a particular interview. Don't be like, okay, well, I've got 10 minutes to shoot here, 10 minutes to shoot there. No, don't do that. Just be conscious. My interviews generally take between a half an hour and an hour. So when I schedule them, I tell my subjects, okay, I'll get there. It'll take a couple of minutes to set up, and we'll and it'll an hour, and then I'm gone. So give yourself that time. Give yourself that time to get there, and because you don't want to be late. We talked about that in the interview. Never be late. Always be early. Take that into account when you're making your schedule. It's important. Take it seriously. It's not fun. It's not exciting, but it will make or break your movie. So scheduling is important. Next, well, is budget. Let's get into it. All right, time to talk about budgets. I know nobody likes to talk about budgets, but you know what? You have to, because they're important for making a movie. In my book, I said that $5,000 is a reasonable amount for a first-time documentary, and I think it is. And as we go through, you'll see why that's the case. Also, I talked about the budget program, the documentary budget program that I made, which is available for download on this channel. And the reason I made it was because I've used a lot of budget programs when I'm making, feature films and stuff. And none of them, as far as I can tell, have the things that I need to budget a documentary film. And as we go through it, you'll see. In fact, I think what we'll do is the next video after this one will be, I think I said that in the other one. We are going to do a primer on the budget program. I'll do that, and that maybe that I'll go in between these. I don't know. But when we talk about the budget, there are things that are integral to documentary films that are not important for feature films. But what you need to think about when you're a one-man band, and you are a one-man band, and what does that mean? Actually, let's talk about that for a second. Man, I am all over the place today. A one-man band is you are driver, you are the guy loading in, you're the guy loading out, you're the guy setting up and breaking down, you're the guy who is asking the questions of your subjects. You are the everything, and that is a one-man band. So when you are a one-man band, you want to make sure that you have everything that you need to be successful in what you're doing. And as far as I can tell, having done this a bit, the things that are most important when you're a one-man band are camera, sound, lighting, and electronics. And we'll get into each of those. And the reason is that you're not paying anybody on a low-budget indie documentary. So the way a budget is broken down, you've got an above-the-line number, a below-the-line number, a post-production number, and then sort of a miscellaneous number. What we're going to concentrate in mostly is the below-the-line number. The above-the-line number where you would be paying people, but you're not going to be paying people. So we're not going to look at that. In fact, you can see here on the what we call the top sheet of the budget how it's broken down, and you can see all of the different categories with regards to where they fall in the budget. We're going to concentrate on mostly what is in the below the line section because that is where your money's going to go. So, firstly, gear, which is a whole other video. We're not going to talk about specific gear, but gear is an expense, and you're going to have to get a good camera, good sound. You might need some lighting, and you're definitely going to need some electronics. So we'll break those down in a second. And then what we call are your location expenses. Flights, there won't be any flights. Hotels, gas, food, and then there's miscellaneous, so we'll get into that in a section. So, but let's start with your gear. When you're a one-man band and you're doing this by yourself, you can't take a chance that when you get on set, something's not going to work. So within your $5,000 budget, you're going to want to spend as much as you can afford on a good camera, on good sound, and good lighting. And we'll get into gear at another time. But this is important, and you're going to spend money on it. That's where your money's going to go. Secondly, and in my budget program, you'll see that there is another page called Table A. Table A, and you'll see it here, is the breakdown for each of your locations. And I think this is so important, and no other budget program I know does this like this, and specifically works for documentary films. Because you're going to different locations, you have expenses that you have at every location. So, as you can see in Table A, you've got your flight, which will remain blank. You got your gas, and we're talking about gas, hotel, food, and a miscellaneous line. So let's talk about those. We'll break them down. No flights, so we're not going to talk about that. Gas. Gas is an expense, and if you don't take gas seriously, that will eat up part of your budget that you don't even think about. And the way that you calculate your gas for a movie is you go on Google Maps, which is amazing, and you figure out the mileage between your house, or wherever you're leaving from, and the place you're going. Take that mileage, double it, because you have to come home, then add about 30, 40 miles on top of that for driving around at the location wherever you're going to be. Take that number, write it down, and then take how many gallons of gas your car holds. My Subaru is a 14-gallon tank. So take that number, 14, and then take the price of gas and multiply that by 14, and that's the cost for one tank of gas. Now, I get about 34 miles to the gallon on the highway, so then take that mileage number, break it down by how many miles you get per tank. I know this is confusing, and then multiply that, and then divide it. Divide it, and that will give you your gas number for the movie. I know it sounds crazy, but gas will absolutely eat up your budget when you're on the road, because unless you have an electric car, which we do actually, and I use that on Rising Tides to go out to Long Island, but most people don't. So gas is an expense that people often overlook. Make sure that you're accurate, because it will cost money. Next is hotels. Now, hotels are an interesting thing, because hotels can either range from, $65, $75 a night, and with that you get a lovely complement of bed bugs and I don't know what else, gun fights, drug paraphernalia, all the way up to, more expensive. Now, for me, when I'm on the road, I like to be comfortable. Often I'm working out of my hotel room. I set up my computers, my editing system. I build my camera in the hotel. So I like to be in a place where I'm not worried about somebody coming in stealing my gear. So I tend to stay at the sort of Hilton, Hampton Inn, $125 a night rooms, because it's safer, it's nicer, and you want to be comfortable. You want to be secure in your mind when you're on the road. So that's an expense, and you got to figure that into your budget. Look, when I went up to Maine for the first part of Rising Tides, I have friends up there. I stayed with them for a week while I was shooting in Portland, and what that did, it saved money in my budget. So when I had to be down in Annapolis for a week, I had the money to pay for the hotels down there. Also, if you stay at a place like Hampton Inn or Hilton and become an awards member, you get points for every hotel you stay in. I had so many points at the end of Rising Tides, 35,000 points, that my last trip paid for the whole hotel. I didn't have to pay anything. So there is an upside to staying in a better place, aside from your mental security. So, be cautious when booking a hotel. Also, you want to book your hotel on the phone, because what you also need to know are the fees. Just because the hotel's $125 a night doesn't mean that's how much it's going to be. There's usually $20 or $30 on top of that for tax and fees. So book it on the phone. This way you can secure your room and get the actual cost and put that in your budget. Food. Food on the road is expensive. Fast food these days, $15 to $20 for fast food. It's not cheap anymore. So when you're on the road, you're eating, you can't help it. But try not to eat fast food all the time, because you'll be sick. Trust me, find better food. But for me, I used to under budget food because I really had an unrealistic idea of how much things cost. So right now, I put $75 in my food budget per day, and that's like 2 meals wherever I go, and some snacks and some drinks. Don't underestimate that, because again, you'll find yourself going over budget. Give yourself a real number. Trying to play with numbers to keep the budget down doesn't help. Real numbers are always good, and overestimate. If you're under budget, that's great. You may not spend $75 a day on food, and then you've got extra money. But $75 is a really good number. And then there's a miscellaneous line. I throw $50 into the miscellaneous line because you never know where you're going to be. I've had headphones break. I need to get headphones, or you might need some cables. On Rising Tides, I spent a lot of time on ferries. So I had a lot of ferry costs, which came out of that $50. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're covered. Don't cheap out on that part of your budget, because when you make a documentary, you're traveling. That is what you're doing. You're on the road. I spend more time on the road making documentaries than I ever did in any of the films I made, even though I made one film like far away on location. Every documentary, you're on the road. So whether it's close or far, you're still traveling. So gas, food, maybe hotel, take it all into account, put it in, make it real. It's got to be a real number. Otherwise, you're going to throw off your whole budget. So then the other part of the budget, after your gear and your location stuff, is your what we call post-production. We're not going to get into that in this video. Post-production is a whole other video. But anyway, so you got your schedule, you got your budget. Those are the first things you need to do when going forward. Once you have your schedule and your budget, then, production. And that's going to be another video. So I hope that was helpful. Chapter 4, pre-production. It's so important, and I can't stress enough how important it is, because I keep saying pre-production. Anyways, read the book, Documentary Filming 101, Documentary Filmmaking. I'm from Brooklyn. I speak very fast. Documentary Filmmaking 101. It's available for free. Download here. And my budget program, which we will get into, is free download here. And the new movie is Rising Tides, as I keep saying, here. It's hopefully going to be out on the documentary channel on YouTube soon. We're talking. Real Brooklyn Films, www.realbrooklynfilms.net. Charlie, I can't do this. Charlie, RBFNYC @gmail.com. That's me. As always, keep shooting.